You can't even imagine what can be hidden in an ordinary house. Subscribe, like, and write in the comments what you would have done in my place. My name is Kate. I'm 24 years old. After the wedding, my husband and I moved into my parents' house in the USA. My stepfather lived there. He had raised me since I was 10 and was like a father to me. At first, I thought he would just be an older person around who would offer advice and support. But life quickly showed that things were not so simple. He was always calm and reserved, but he had a look that made everything inside me tremble. They seemed like ordinary words in simple everyday situations, but between them, there was always a subtle line that was impossible not to notice. One evening, when my husband was late from work, we were left alone. I was making dinner in the kitchen and suddenly felt that I was being watched. I turned around. He was standing in the doorway silently, with a cup of tea in his hands. His gaze was too long, too attentive. I pretended not to notice, but inside me, everything had already turned upside down. At that time, I didn't know that this was just the beginning of a story that would change my life. I continued to stir the soup, trying not to show that I felt his gaze, but every second was getting harder. He came into the kitchen, put the cup on the table and quietly said, "You shouldn't work so hard alone." His voice was calm but too close, too soft. I turned to answer and caught his gaze direct, as if he was waiting for something. For a moment, a silence hung between us. Only the sound of rain outside filled the room. I quickly turned away as if nothing had happened, but my hands were trembling betrayingly. He noticed it. I was sure. And at that moment, I understood that we would no longer be just a simple stepfather and stepdaughter. That dangerous shadow, which could destroy the usual order, had begun to form between us. That night was the first time I went to bed and couldn't fall asleep for a long time, feeling his silent gaze on me, which seemed to stay with me even in the dark. The next morning, I tried to act as if nothing had happened. My husband had a quick breakfast and went to work, and I stayed in the kitchen to do the dishes. And then I heard footsteps behind me again. My stepfather came in unhurriedly, sat at the table, and started to read a newspaper. It seemed like everything was normal, but I could feel his presence filling the entire space. Every time I walked past him, he would look up, and that gaze would send a shiver down my spine. "You didn't sleep well," he suddenly said without looking up from the page. I froze, flustered. How could he know that? "I'm fine," I replied, trying to smile. He slowly folded the newspaper and said, "I see more than you think." These words sounded as if there was already a secret between us that no one else knew. And at that moment I realized that he was not going to pretend that nothing was there. And I no longer knew if I could continue to pretend. I automatically sat down at the table across from him, trying to distract myself with small things, straightening the tablecloth, putting a mug down. But all of this was just an attempt to hide my anxiety. His gaze was calm but too intense, and I felt it penetrating my very depths. "You've changed," he said softly, almost casually, as if discussing the weather. "You used to try to avoid my eyes." I didn't know what to say. My heart was beating too loudly, and words were stuck in my throat. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and continued to stare. There was a palpable tension between us. I tried to get up, but he leaned slightly forward and his voice stopped me. "Don't go. We both know this is not a coincidence." These words pierced the silence more powerfully than thunder. And at that moment, I clearly felt that everything that had previously seemed like casual glances and trifles had now become a blatant reality from which there was no turning back. I froze in place. My fingers were still gripping the edge of the table. His words sounded too frank, too direct, and everything inside me turned upside down. I couldn't look up, afraid to see in his eyes what I had long felt myself. He slowly stood up and moved closer. His steps were calm, but in that silence, every sound echoed louder than a heartbeat. He stopped next to me, so close that I could feel his breath. "You feel it too, don't you?" he said softly, almost in a whisper, as if he was afraid the walls would hear. I struggled to breathe, trying to say something, but the words wouldn't come. At that moment, I realized that everything I had been avoiding for so long was now standing right in front of me, and our future depended on my answer. And the longer this pause lasted, the clearer it became. We had both gone too far to turn back. I looked up and our eyes met. At that moment, everything around us disappeared. The kitchen, the morning, the street noise outside the window. There were only the two of us left, and the silence was thick, as if the whole house was holding its breath. He didn't make any sudden moves. He just stood there, waiting. His hand rested on the edge of the table, so close to mine that there were only inches left until a touch. I could feel the warmth of his skin, and it drove me crazy more than any words. "You understand," he said quietly but firmly. "From this moment on, everything will change." My heart was beating so fast that I could almost hear it in my ears. I knew that all it would take was for me to reach out or say a single word, and we would cross an invisible line. And at that very second, I realized that I had already made my choice, even if I hadn't said a word out loud. My hand trembled and my fingers almost touched his. It was such a small movement, but he noticed it instantly. His gaze became even deeper, heavier, as if he had read my resolve before I even realized it myself. He leaned in a little closer, and the air between us seemed to heat up. I felt his breath on my skin, and it drove me crazier than any touch. My chest tightened and I realized that there was no turning back. He reached out and carefully brushed a strand of hair from my face. This gesture was so simple, but it held all the truth we had been hiding for so long. His fingers lingered at my temple, and I closed my eyes for a second, allowing the moment to happen. When I looked at him again, there were no longer any barriers between us. We both knew there was no going back now. His fingers slid lower down my cheek, and that simple touch made everything inside me turn upside down. I felt my breathing become ragged, and my heart beat so fast that it felt like it would burst out of my chest. He was standing so close, and all it would take was one shove to erase the distance between us. But I didn't do it. I let him make the decision himself, and he did. His hand softly rested on my waist, confidently but gently, as if he was afraid of scaring me away. I didn't pull away. On the contrary, my fingers reached for his chest, feeling the hot rhythm of his heart. At that moment, all words became unnecessary. Our gazes and the silence said more for us than we could have admitted out loud. We had crossed the line that had been keeping us apart for so long, and now everything was different. His hand on my waist grew firmer, and I felt him pull me closer to him. My breathing faltered, and that very tension that had been building between us for too long flowed into my chest. I heard the floorboards creak under our feet, and the ticking of the clock on the wall suddenly became unbearably loud. Everything around us intensified, as if reality itself was pushing us to do what we had both been waiting for. He leaned in so close that I could make out every breath he took. His eyes lingered on my lips, and I knew he wouldn't hold back anymore. Inside me, the last bits of reason and desire fought, but the winner was obvious. I didn't push him away, I didn't turn away, on the contrary, I took a barely noticeable step toward him. And at that moment, everything was decided. We were no longer just a stepfather and a stepdaughter. We had become people connected by a forbidden, but too powerful night. He held me closer and our hearts beat as one. I felt his warmth envelop me, leaving me unable to think of anything else. His lips were so close that our breaths mingled, and the whole world disappeared, leaving only that tense moment. I closed my eyes, letting him be the one to erase the last boundary we had held for so long. His hand slid down my back and a shiver ran through me, not from fear, but from finally allowing myself to be real with him. This second was a turning point. We both knew there was no going back. Everything that had previously seemed forbidden had now become inevitable. And on this night, our house stopped being just a shared dwelling. It became a place where a story happened that no one should ever know. I felt his hand press me closer to him, and in that touch, there was so much strength and tenderness at the same time that it took my breath away. We stood so close that any movement became an admission, and I could no longer resist this attraction. He looked me straight in the eyes, and in his gaze there was no doubt or hesitation, only desire and certainty. My heart was beating so hard that it felt like he could hear its pounding. I took a deep breath, and as I exhaled, I allowed what we had both been waiting for to happen. The world around us disappeared, the ticking of the clock, the sound of the wind outside the window. Even my thoughts vanished. All that was left was this closeness, which consumed us completely. That night, we crossed an invisible line and became different people. And I understood that this was no longer a game, a coincidence, or a mistake. It was inevitable. He ran his hand through my hair, lingering at the back of my neck, and I felt how everything was hidden in that movement. Tenderness, longing, and that very strength that was impossible to resist. His breathing became faster, and my heart was pounding so hard that it felt like it would burst. I pressed closer, allowing him to finally erase all the boundaries between us. His palm confidently slid down my back, and from it, everything inside me ignited, as if the fire we had been hiding for too long had finally burst out. At that moment, I knew we were no longer holding back. Every second now belonged only to us, and the night became a witness to the fact that we were no longer strangers. This closeness was forbidden, but it was in it that I first felt truly alive. I heard his breathing become deeper, hotter, and every one of his breaths scorched my skin. His hand rested more firmly on my waist, and I felt as if I was dissolving in that touch. Everything that seemed impossible and forbidden now became the only reality. My body responded on its own without hesitation. I leaned closer. My fingers slid across his chest, feeling the strength beneath the fabric. His gaze was heavy, captivating. There was so much desire in it that I stopped breathing. We were no longer playing games of chance and innuendo. Every gesture, every glance spoke more revealingly than any words. And in that second, I understood that this night would be special, one that I would never forget, no matter what it cost us both. His lips were so close that there was almost no air left between us. I felt his warmth, his strength, and everything inside me trembled with tension. His hand slid softly but confidently higher up my back, pulling me to him so that I couldn't pull away, even if I had wanted to. My fingers found his shoulder on their own. I gripped the fabric of his shirt, and that movement seemed to be the last point of no return. My chest tightened, my heart was beating unbearably loud, and I knew we had finally crossed the line. The world ceased to exist. Not the house, not the walls, not the ticking of the clock, only the two of us in this forbidden closeness. And at that moment I knew everything was decided. And on this night, our story got a continuation that no one expected. He leaned in even closer, and now his breath completely mingled with mine. His palm pressed me tighter to him, and I felt the whole world disappear, leaving only that tense moment. My lips trembled, and I no longer tried to look away. On the contrary, I leaned in myself, as if I had been waiting for this very second all along. His eyes flashed, and he allowed what we had been hiding for so long to finally burst out. His touches became bolder, and my heart no longer belonged to me. I felt how with every second, all the barriers between us were crumbling, and a feeling was rising inside me that this night would change everything forever. We stopped holding back, we stopped being afraid. There was only one thing. Him and me, bound by something that could no longer be denied. His arms wrapped around me tighter, and I felt him press me so close that there was no distance left between us. My breathing became ragged. I buried my face in his shoulder, feeling the scent of his skin, mixed with the aroma of tobacco and wood. He whispered my name softly, and a shiver ran down my spine. His voice was low, confident, but it held something new, something he had hidden just as stubbornly as I had. My fingers gripped the fabric of his shirt even tighter, and I could no longer think about prohibitions, about what would happen tomorrow. The seconds stretched on endlessly, and each one of them brought us closer to what we had been avoiding for so long. At that moment, I knew this night would be ours, no matter what the cost would be later. His hand slowly slid down my back, and that movement was so confident that it took my breath away. I looked up and met his gaze. In it, the very feeling that we had both been hiding for so long was burning. In this moment, all the power of prohibitions dissolved, leaving only the desire and the need to be close. He leaned in even closer, and I felt his warmth so clearly that a shiver ran through my entire body. I didn't pull away. On the contrary, I leaned forward myself, as if I could no longer hold back what had been building up all this time. Our fingers intertwined, and in that simplicity, there was more truth than in any words. I knew that from this moment on, we would never be able to live the way we used to. This night would become the border after which another life would begin. A secret dangerous but our own. He squeezed my fingers tighter, and in that movement, there was so much strength and resolve that it took my breath away. His eyes didn't let go, and I understood that he wasn't waiting for words, but for my choice. I felt his palm slide up to my face and gently touch my cheek. From that touch, everything inside me ignited, and I could no longer resist. I took a step closer, allowing myself to finally erase the subtle line that had held us until this moment. A silence hung in the room, interrupted only by our breathing. His arms wrapped around me, holding me so tightly as if he was afraid to let go for a second. I buried my face in his shoulder, feeling how his heart was pounding wildly, and I knew it was a reflection of my own. This closeness was forbidden, but it was in it that I first felt the long-awaited freedom. His embraces became tighter, as if he wanted to protect me not only from the outside world but also from the reality in which we had lived until this moment. I heard his breath right by my ear, feeling how every second was engulfing us more and more. He pulled back a little to look into my eyes. In that gaze there was no shadow of a doubt, only a resolve, a feeling that was no longer possible to hide. I knew that if I looked away now, I would ruin everything. So I stayed, allowing him to see everything that was inside me. He slowly ran his fingers through my hair and then lingered at my neck. It took my breath away, and I couldn't hold back the shiver, not from fear but from anticipation. Everything around us ceased to exist. The walls, the ticking of the clock, even the thought of tomorrow. There were only the two of us left, connected by a secret, and this forbidden moment that was now impossible to stop. His palm softly rested on my neck, and from that touch, I felt as if I had lost my footing. My heart was beating so fast that I could barely breathe. He looked me straight in the eyes, and in that gaze I could read everything. Desire, resolve, and that very feeling that we had both been hiding for too long. I raised my hand and touched his chest, feeling his heart beating under my palm. This movement was an admission without words. He knew I wasn't going to back down. His fingers slowly slid to my face, and I closed my eyes for a second, allowing myself to dissolve in this moment. When I opened them, he was so close that the distance between us had completely disappeared. The world seemed to stand still. This second was a turning point. Now we couldn't stop. Everything that had previously been hints and tension had turned into a real reality that belonged only to us. He pulled me to him so close that there was nothing left between us, no air, no doubts. I felt his strength, his warmth, and I knew this night would be special. We had crossed a line beyond which there were no usual roles or prohibitions. In his eyes, I saw what I was afraid to admit. We can't go back to our old lives. And when I pressed against him, the world around us disappeared. Only our secret remained. That night became our special night, after which everything changed forever.